Business Essentials Podcast. Unlock your career.
Learn to speak business English like a pro.
Picture this. You've just nailed your presentation. Everything went perfectly. Then someone raises their hand during Q&A, and suddenly you're stumbling over your own words. Sound familiar? Today, we're tackling handling Q&A sessions. Specifically, never stumble during Q&A again. The techniques that work. This is where even confident speakers can completely fall apart, and we're going to fix that. Plus, if you're leveling up your business English at B2 or C1, you're going to hear some incredibly useful phrases throughout this conversation. Sarah, why do you think even really polished presenters suddenly lose it when the questions start flying?
Happy to be here, Marcus. The data tells a fascinating story. 35% of public speakers say their biggest challenge isn't actually delivering their content, it's handling Q&A sessions. And here's the thing. 90% of presentation anxiety comes from inadequate preparation. But Q&A is almost always the least prepared part of most presentations. People just don't think about it until it's too late.
So basically, people rehearse their slides for hours and then just wing the entire Q&A section?
Exactly right. And what's really interesting is what happens physiologically when someone asks an unexpected question. Your amygdala, which is essentially your brain's alarm system, activates the exact same way it would if you were facing physical danger. Your body literally doesn't know the difference between a hostile question and an actual threat.
Wait, my brain actually thinks I'm in danger during Q&A?
Your nervous system doesn't distinguish between a quarterly board presentation and physical danger. Both trigger the same neural circuits. And here's the problem. When your amygdala hijacks your response, your prefrontal cortex, your logical brain, becomes less active while your limbic system takes over. That's why you suddenly can't access information you definitely know.
So it's not that I forgot, it's that my brain shut down?
Exactly. Under stress, working memory gets overwhelmed, which leads to fumbling and what people call mental freezing. It's not a character flaw. It's ancient neurobiology designed to protect you.
For our listeners learning English, what does mental freezing mean?
Good question. Mental freezing is when your mind goes blank under pressure. You literally can't think or remember things you know. In business English, you might hear people say, "I froze up during the presentation," or "My mind went blank when they asked that question." It's that moment when stress overwhelms your ability to think clearly.
Okay, so what's the biggest mistake people make when this happens?
The number one mistake is answering before you've fully understood the question. People hear the first part of a question and assume they know where it's going, so they start formulating their answer while the questioner is still speaking.
And that backfires?
Completely. Your answer seems out of touch, you appear not to listen, and the questioner feels unheard. This frustrates the audience and damages your credibility. Under stress, your brain shifts to reactive mode, and your working memory is already taxed, so you literally can't listen and think simultaneously.
So what should they do instead?
You pause when a question is asked, listen actively until the questioner finishes, and then ask a clarifying question if needed. Something like, "So if I understand you correctly, you're asking about X, is that right?"
That's a good phrase. If I understand you correctly. How would you use that in a real meeting?
You'd use it anytime you want to confirm understanding before responding. Like in a negotiation, you might say, "So if I understand you correctly, your main concern is the implementation timeline, not the cost?" Or in a team meeting, "If I understand you correctly, you're saying we should prioritize the European market first?" It shows you're listening carefully and gives you time to organize your thoughts.
So what's another big mistake?
Rushing your response and mumbling through uncertainty. The moment a question is asked, people feel pressure to respond immediately. They start talking before they've organized their thoughts, filling silences with, like, and vague statements.
And that makes them sound unprepared?
Even if their underlying knowledge is solid, they sound uncertain. Listeners interpret hesitation as lack of expertise, and credibility drops measurably. But here's the thing. Silence feels unbearably long to speakers. 2 seconds feels like 10, so you rush to fill it.
So the pause is actually okay.
The pause is not just okay, it's strategic. Research shows that well-timed pauses improve audience retention by up to 40%. When speakers use pauses strategically, listeners interpret this as confidence and thoughtfulness rather than uncertainty.
Really? So pausing makes you look more confident?
Absolutely. A 2 to 3 second pause feels much longer to the speaker than to the audience. And during that pause, you're allowing your amygdala to calm down, parasympathetic activation, before you respond. This lowers stress hormones and improves clarity.
Can you give me an example of what that would look like?
Sure. Imagine you're in a board presentation and someone asks you a challenging question about why your strategy failed last year. The wrong way is to immediately start talking. Well, there were a lot of factors, and the market conditions were difficult, and we tried our best, but the right way is you pause for 2 to 3 seconds, take a visible breath, and then respond clearly. That's a critical question. The main factor was market volatility, which we underestimated by about 30%. We've since implemented a quarterly forecasting review to catch these shifts earlier. Here's what changed.
That's so much more powerful. What about when someone asks a hostile question?
That's another common mistake, getting defensive or emotional. When a questioner asks something that feels like an attack, people take it personally. Their voice tightens, their face flushes, and they respond defensively or with irritation.
And the audience sees that?
Absolutely. Even if you're right, your emotional reaction makes you look weak or unprofessional. The hostile questioner wins the exchange in the audience's eyes because you appeared rattled.
So what's the fix?
When you sense hostility, you consciously pause, smile genuinely, and take a breath. You acknowledge the question as important. That's a critical point. Thank you for raising it. Then you respond calmly and factually, without matching the questioner's tone.
So you're staying composed no matter what.
Exactly. Your amygdala activates, threat detection, and your sympathetic nervous system floods you with cortisol and adrenaline. But research shows that cognitive reframing combined with physiological regulation, breathing, posture, reduces anxiety symptoms by 40 to 60%.
For our listeners learning English, what does cognitive reframing mean?
Great question. Cognitive reframing means changing how you think about a situation. Instead of viewing a hostile question as a personal attack, you reframe it as an opportunity to demonstrate your expertise. In business English, you might say, "Let's reframe this challenge as an opportunity," or "We need to reframe how we're thinking about this problem." It's about shifting perspective intentionally.
What about when you genuinely don't know the answer?
That's mistake number 4. Admitting ignorance without a plan to address it. Someone asks you something you don't know, you freeze, look panicked, say, "I don't know," and then move on to the next question.
And that damages credibility?
It does, but not because you said, "I don't know." It's how you handle not knowing that determines whether it increases or decreases your credibility. The right way is to own it with confidence. "That's a great question. I don't have the exact data on that in my head right now, but it's something I can research and get back to you on. Would you be willing to share your email?"
So you're turning it into follow-up action.
Exactly. Or you could say, "I don't know, but let's talk about it after the session. I'd love to hear your perspective too." You appear honest and confident enough to admit limitations. The audience respects intellectual honesty more than bluffing.
That's a good phrase. I'd love to hear your perspective. How would you use that?
It's a collaborative phrase that invites dialogue rather than creating defensiveness. You'd use it when you want to shift from one-way presenting to two-way conversation. Like in a stakeholder meeting. "I'd love to hear your perspective on the timeline." Or in a team discussion. "I'd love to hear your perspective on which approach would work best." It signals openness and respect.
Okay, so give me the framework. How should someone actually prepare for Q&A?
So I use what I call the composed Q&A framework. It's got 5 phases. Phase 1 is preparation. Most people prepare their remarks while leaving Q&A to chance, but 90% of presentation anxiety comes from inadequate preparation.
So you need to prepare for questions?
Absolutely. You sit with colleagues or mentors and brainstorm questions your specific audience might ask. Think like skeptics and critics. What would they challenge? Then, for each likely question, you write a 2 to 3 sentence core answer and practice elaborating with supporting evidence or examples.
So you're building a mental database of answers.
Exactly. And you practice out loud. Don't just read your answers, speak them aloud multiple times. This moves knowledge from intellectual understanding to spontaneous recall. Your brain needs proof that you can handle these questions before it stops treating them as threats.
What's phase 2?
Phase 2 is listening. You cannot answer a question well if you don't fully understand it. Most stumbles happen because speakers answered a different question than what was asked. So you face the questioner directly, make eye contact, and lean slightly forward. This body language tells your brain you're in listening mode, not defending mode.
And you resist formulating your answer while they're still talking?
Exactly. Your brain can't do both well. You look for the real question. Sometimes people ask a surface question, but the underlying concern is different. You listen for what's driving the question, and you listen for the emotion behind it.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Imagine in a board presentation someone asks, "This strategy seems overly ambitious given last year's failures. How are you planning to avoid repeating those mistakes?" The surface question is, how will you avoid past failures? But the underlying concern is, will this waste more money? Should we trust your judgment? And the emotion is skepticism and concern about fiduciary responsibility.
So you need to address all 3 layers.
Yes, you'd respond, "I hear your concern. Last year's challenges shook everyone's confidence, and that's a legitimate question. The key difference this time is, by listening for the underlying question and emotion, you address the real concern, not just the surface question."
What's phase 3?
Phase 3 is clarifying. Asking clarifying questions does 3 things. It ensures you understood correctly, it gives your brain processing time, and it shows the questioner you're taking their concern seriously. You use phrases like, "So if I understand correctly, you're asking about X, is that right?" Or, "Are you referring to X or Y?"
So you're buying yourself time to think while appearing engaged.
Exactly. And this technique is especially powerful for confusing or multi-part questions. You might say, "When you say the approach won't scale, what scale are you thinking of?" This reveals their specific concern and gives you the intelligence you need for a targeted answer.
What's phase 4?
Phase 4 is responding with structure. Structured answers sound organized and confident. They prevent rambling and ensure you hit your key points. You use what I call the rule of 3. Answer with 3 main points. The brain remembers 3 better than 2 or 4.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Imagine in a sales presentation, someone asks, "How do you handle customer retention once implementation is complete?" You'd use a problem-solution-result structure. That's essential because many clients struggle with adoption post-implementation. Here's how we differ. First, we embed a success manager with each client for the first 90 days, not just a support ticket. Second, we run quarterly business reviews where we identify new use cases and optimization opportunities. Third, our retention rate is 94% because clients see ongoing value, not just one-time implementation.
So you're leading with your strongest point.
Right. You lead with your strongest point, support with specifics, numbers, examples, case studies, and end with a callback to the original question. And when you've answered, you stop. You ask, "Does that answer your question?" rather than continuing to fill silence.
That's a good phrase. Does that answer your question? Is that common in business English?
Very common, especially in presentations and stakeholder meetings. It shows confidence and respect for the audience's time. You're checking in rather than assuming you've satisfied their concern. Alternatives are, does that address your concern? Or, is there another aspect of that I should address? All signal that you're responsive and engaged.
What's phase 5?
Phase 5 is graceful recovery. Even excellent speakers occasionally freeze, lose their place, or stumble. But how you recover from a mistake builds more confidence than perfect performance. Your audience respects grace under pressure.
So what do you do if you lose your train of thought?
You acknowledge the moment. Let me rephrase that, or give me a moment, I want to get this right. You use recovery phrases like, actually, let me back up, or what I meant to say was, but you never apologize excessively. A simple, let me recalibrate works better than, I'm sorry, I'm so nervous.
For our listeners learning English, what does recalibrate mean in this context?
Recalibrate means to adjust or reset something to improve accuracy. In presentations, saying, let me recalibrate means you're pausing to reorganize your thoughts and approach the question more effectively. In business English, you might also hear, we need to recalibrate our strategy based on market feedback. Or, let's recalibrate our expectations for Q4. It signals intentional adjustment, not failure.
Give me one more real-world example of how this all comes together.
Sure. Imagine you're in a live investor pitch. Someone asks a challenging question about your customer acquisition cost. You pause for 2 seconds, take a visible breath, and say, that's an excellent question. It gets at the heart of our unit economics. Then you give a structured answer. Last quarter, our customer acquisition cost was $45 per customer. That's down from $62 the quarter before, which represents a 27% improvement. The key drivers were optimized ad targeting and improved conversion rates on our landing pages. We expect to hit our target of $38 per customer by Q3.
So you've paused, acknowledged the question, given structured data, and projected forward?
Exactly. And you end with, does that answer your question? If they nod, you move to the next question. If they look uncertain, you ask, is there another aspect of that I should address? You maintain control by staying responsive and composed.
Before we wrap up, let's recap the key terms we talked about today.
Sure. The main ones were mental freezing, amygdala hijacking, cognitive reframing, strategic pausing, and recalibrate. Mental freezing is when your mind goes blank under pressure. Amygdala hijacking is when your brain's threat detection system takes over during stress. Cognitive reframing means changing how you think about a situation to view it more constructively. Strategic pausing is intentionally using silence to create processing time and convey thoughtfulness. And recalibrate means to adjust or reset your approach to improve accuracy.
So, Sarah, what's the one thing you want people to take from this?
The single most powerful technique is the strategic pause. When someone asks a question, pause for 2 to 3 seconds before responding. That pause does 4 things. It activates your parasympathetic nervous system to calm your amygdala. It gives your brain processing time to organize your answer. It signals to the audience that you're thoughtful and confident, and it increases your perceived authority by 37 to 41%. Master the pause, and you've transformed your Q&A performance.
Next episode, we're talking about keep them following, transitions that don't lose your audience. Ever been in a presentation where the speaker lost you because they jumped from topic to topic without warning? We're breaking down the exact transition techniques that keep audiences engaged, the psychological reasons why certain transitions work while others create confusion, and the common mistakes that fragment your narrative. If you've ever heard feedback that your presentations feel disjointed, this episode will transform how you structure and connect your ideas.
Once you master transitions, your entire presentation game levels up. It's like the difference between a bumpy ride and a smooth journey.
We've loved having you in the room with us.
See you next time.
Business Essentials Podcast. Unlock your career.
Learn to speak business English like a pro.